Tired of restless nights? At Lisa, we know good sleep is essential for mental, physical, and emotional health. From memory foam mattresses to hybrids that keep you cool all night long, Lisa's mattresses offer exceptional comfort and support with free delivery and 100 nights to try out your mattress in the comfort of your home. For a limited time, save up to $700 off select mattresses plus 2 free pillows. Go to lisa.com/iHeart for an additional $50 off mattresses and select goods. Exclusions apply. See lisa.com for more details.
Cruising out of Port Canaveral? Don't miss the boat. It's time to set the cruise control with a trip to Cocoa Beach. With hotels and resorts just minutes away from the ships at Port Canaveral, Cocoa Beach is the perfect place for you to get into vacation mode before your cruise. Start your cruise vacation with a walk on the beach. Cocoa Beach on Florida's Space Coast. Find out more at legendarycocobeach.com.
It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Lance Meadow, John Schmelk with you. The phone number is 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. We'll get to your calls early and often on today's show. Lance, I thought it would be a good idea. We haven't talked about this much, to kind of go around the league and see where the kind of coaching searches have been heading and where they are. We'll do that quick. The Giants obviously still trying to find a defensive coordinator and special teams coordinator. The Giants have not been announcing any of those interviews. But we can talk about a lot of teams. In addition to the head coaches, there's a lot of coordinator spots available too around the league. So we'll talk about that. And then since I am getting on a plane tomorrow morning, we'll do a little preview of the Senior Bowl and Shrine Game as well as we head into next week in college all-star season. And then we start getting into the draft process as well. Lance, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, and it is a busy time in the National Football League, as you mentioned. Also, Joe Barry was let go by the Green Bay Packers, their defensive coordinator. We had been talking about that earlier in the week, so that's another team that did not have a head coaching change that is now going to be looking for a defensive coordinator. The Eagles are in the same boat as they parted ways with Matt Patricia and Sean Desai. So it's not just the 8 teams that are searching for head coaches or have already. It's now a few more in addition to that.
And Eagles in line for a new offensive coordinator as well, according to Tom Pelissero. The Jaguars are looking for a defensive coordinator.
Well, no, they filled it already.
Oh, did they? Who
the Jaguars hired Ryan Nielsen, former Falcons defensive
That's right. They did bring him in. You're
so
right.
That one is done.
Good call.
Yeah.
Raiders, it looks like they're going to retain Patrick Graham, but they need to hire an offensive coordinator on that side.
Sure.
The Saints need an offensive coordinator. The Steelers need an offensive coordinator. And there's other teams as well that are looking for, obviously, all these head coaches are going to need to fill out their coordinator staff as well when they eventually make their move. So a lot going on with that. We'll keep an eye on what the Giants are doing with special teams and defensive coordinator as well. Obviously, for a lot of these jobs, teams will be trying to hire people off of the 4 teams that remain still in the postseason, so they will have to wait and be a little bit more patient. But there are some decisions that have been made. The Titans hired Brian Callahan, who's the son of longtime offensive line coach Bill Callahan, to be their head coach rather, and he's going to call the plays there as well, which is ironic because he did not call the plays when he was in Cincinnati. So he's going to be taking on two brand new jobs at the same time, which you wonder, that's a lot for one person to start doing both for the first time. We'll see. I'm curious to see how that's going to work out.
I mean, that may be his plan right now. He may change that depending on how the offseason plays out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you would want to try to. It's hard enough to be the head coach for the first year. To be a first-time play caller on top of that, that's asking a lot. So we'll see how that goes for him. New England Patriots, Jared Mayo, obviously, it was written into his contract. He would be the successor to Bill Belichick, so he's the new head coach in New England. They're trying to fill out their staffs there as well up in New England. The Raiders, they retain Antonio Pierce, former Giant. Again, it looks like Patrick Graham is going to stay there as defensive coordinator. They announced there was a report that they're going to interview Mike Sullivan, former Giants, quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator as well for their offensive coordinator position. But there are 5 spots, Lance, that are still remaining with open head coaching positions. You have the Panthers. It's been long rumored that Ben Johnson is the favorite for that spot, the Lions offensive coordinator, but they've done a lot of interviews as well.
Well,
with
Dave Canales just got his second interview,
Yep.
the Bucs offensive coordinator.
Who did a really nice job with Baker Mayfield this year. Then you have the Falcons, who they've done a couple interviews with Bill Belichick. I believe they've done Jim Harbaugh twice as well.
Yep.
So they've had a bunch of interviews there. That's the only job that Belichick has been connected to over the course of this process, which is interesting. The Harbaugh report was that I believe they're within striking distance. Is that
for
what
the
report
Chargers,
was for the Los Angeles Chargers? Then you have the Washington Commanders and the Seattle Seahawks, where they've done a bunch of interviews, but there hasn't been anyone really specifically linked with those specific jobs.
Well, and with the Commanders, you have the general manager in place in Adam Peters, who they brought over from the Niners. The Raiders just hired Tom Telesco, former Chargers general manager, because there's a number of these teams that also were looking for head coaches and general managers.
And the Panthers promoted Dan Morgan from
correct.
within to be their GM.
Yeah, so as soon as some of these teams solidify their general manager spots, you figure that makes it a little bit easier for them to then make a hire for a head coach.
Fact, Lance, how many GM spots? The Falcons have their GM. They retain theirs, right? The Chargers still have to hire their GM, because that would be probably
correct. They got rid of Telesco.
Harbaugh.
Yep.
Washington has their GM. Seattle, obviously, John Schneider's still there, so he's still their GM. So I think that might be the only spot that needs a GM left, no?
Yeah, but I'm just saying there's been a fury of several teams
correct.
that have recently
But I think the Chargers are the only
hires.
team left without a GM, no?
Yeah, of those 8 teams that you have on the list, well, unless the Patriots decide to hire a general manager.
The Patriots, good point, yeah. So I guess those would be the two, right?
Yeah,
because
Bob Kraft did not make it certain that was going to be the plan, given the fact that Belichick held both roles. They may just have somebody be a pseudo general manager who's already in the front office, or they could very well bring in somebody.
They need a personnel guy to run personnel. That's what they need. Whether he's titled,
he may not have that title.
Not,
correct?
But who cares? They need. You can't ask Jared Mayo to be the general.
No,
manager
but they
and
could
head
very
coach.
well have somebody internal that just takes on that role. I don't think that's crazy at all. Plus, I mean, remember, Mayo's been within the organization as a player and as an assistant, so he knows all the personnel people.
Correct.
If they promote somebody or give the title to somebody, that's not that big of an adjustment. The bigger surprise was more of, I think, what the Raiders did, because Telesco and Pierce don't have any history together, and that's unusual. You know, normally you'd have the general manager in place first, and then they'd finalize the head coach. Here they promoted Antonio Pierce, then they brought in Tom Telesco. I thought that was a little bit interesting.
Yeah, and I get bringing in a GM that has experience, because you want to pair him with a head coach that hasn't done the job before. But Tom Telesco also, he had 2 really good quarterbacks in L.A. with Phillip Rivers and now Justin Herbert. Never exactly put together a championship caliber team either.
But had a really good draft class year in and year out, though. If you go back and you look at the history of the talent he brought in, Chargers were not lacking talent. The Chargers were lacking health, durability, and efficiency on special teams. That was the Chargers' biggest issue. I mean, he brought in Keenan Allen. He brought in Justin Herbert. He brought in Rashawn Slater. He brought in several guys on defense, including Derwin James. I mean, there's at least one player per year that turned out to be a big part of that core.
True.
For Telesco.
I will say this, though. Quentin Johnston, not a great rookie.
Well,
year.
that was the most recent class.
I'm just going through the classes. Zion Johnson has not played particularly well as a first-round guard. You're right, Rashawn Slater the year before was very good. Justin Herbert. Then Kenneth Murray as a first-round pick. He got benched by them.
Linebacker.
That did not work out. Jerry Tillery, that did not work out. Nasir Adderley, their second-round pick, did not work out. So there are a number of classes where the first-round pick did not hit either.
Yeah, but I think overall, I would argue if you look at his entire drafting process, I think it's pretty impressive.
Sure.
And I could see why the Raiders went after him, because
they
they feel
Joey
that he's
Bosa,
going to
Mike
get talent.
Williams, Derwin James.
I mean, he's had
There are good names
playmakers
there.
year in and
Kaiser
year
White
out.
even.
Yeah, a lot of good talent that came in. Even the cornerback that they drafted, Asante Samuel Jr.,
he's been good.
too, is another guy that he brought in. So, I mean, I like the hire. I just thought it was unusual, the timing and who they're matching up. I thought other teams would actually make a push for Telesco. And I was also thinking, remember, Telesco came from the Patriots organization. If Belichick wound up going somewhere, I thought maybe Telesco as a general manager
Telesco came
would
from the
make
Patriots.
sense, because there's a bit of a history, but that wouldn't make sense in Atlanta because, A, you already have Rich McKay there, who's a highly respected front office executive, and Terry Fontenot, who is not technically the head chief there because McKay's the CEO. The way that Falcons have it set up is the general manager and the head coach have equal power and both report to McKay. So New England is very different setup-wise than what Atlanta presents, but Belichick at least has some good guys to lean on in the event he decides to take that job.
And now here are the main, and this is, I think, what's interesting, Lance, and add names that you think I'm forgetting here. The main candidates for head coaching positions based on what we've seen, right? And guys that have gotten multiple interviews in places, all right? You have Dan Quinn, Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, obviously, Jim Harbaugh, obviously, Mike Vrabel, who has not, I feel like, had a ton of interviews over the course of this process, which is surprising to me. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, the Ravens defensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Texans, Dave Canales, to your point, the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, and then Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator for the Giants. A couple of the Ravens defensive assistants have been interviewed for defensive coordinator jobs, or reported to be. Any other main guys you would put on that list in terms of head coach candidates that I missed?
That's a good question. I don't really think off the top of my head anybody that we missed of that group. I'm perusing NFL teams to see if there's another coordinator that maybe hasn't received interest but should. I would throw out, I think that there's a few guys that are intriguing in terms of coordinator positions. For example, Eric Bieniemy has not received a lot of interest. Remember, he was a hot commodity in years past. I know Bieniemy interviewed for the Washington job, but, there's no guarantee with a new general manager and Anna Peters that they want to promote somebody from internally. But I will say this, whoever needs an offensive coordinator position should go after Eric Bieniemy. And if I'm actually Nick Sirianni, I'd go after Eric Bieniemy if he doesn't get the Washington Commanders job because, A, he knows the division. He's worked with a wide array of talent. He's a former NFL player, and the Eagles need an established individual to call plays after what they went through with Brian Johnson, the QB coach, who did not have previous play calling duties. So that's the one name that we didn't mention. I'd keep Eric Bieniemy in the mix. I know Cliff Kingsbury has already interviewed also.
Those were
some places for OCs. Well, that's another name, but former head coach who has plenty of experience. I mean, that's who I think Philadelphia should target.
Raheem Morris is another one
Rams
from the Rams defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive
DC.
coordinator, someone that has been interviewed for a job. Anthony Weaver, that was one of the Ravens defensive coaches that I talked about.
I could see Josh McDaniels going back to an OC somewhere.
Well, if Belichick gets the job,
Correct.
I could see him teaming up with him. The other guy that probably
Todd Monken, right? He got
Todd
an
Monken,
too.
the Ravens offensive coordinator. And he actually went for a few head coaching interviews, I believe, before they had the previous round. And he's a hot commodity because of what he did for the Ravens.
David Shaw had a couple
him.
interviews with people.
Former Stanford coach.
Yeah.
Yep.
Going through some of these other names here. Todd Monken had a couple of coaching interviews as well. The Seahawks offensive coordinator just took that job.
Took with the Bears.
In the Bears, which I think is a really good
Shane
fit.
Waldron.
Yep, Shane Waldron, who did a nice job with Geno Smith there. I'm surprised.
Yep.
Well, new head coach, you don't want to force anybody on him. I totally understand that. But that basically, I think, adds it up. So I think the question here, Lance, is who's going to be left without a dance partner? Because you only have 5 spots remaining here. Dan Quinn, Belichick, Harbaugh, Ben Johnson, Vrabel, Mike McDonald. Those are the guys, and Raheem Morris. Those are the guys that I would consider like the guys that are ready, right? Bobby Slowick's got a lot of interviews. He's only been calling plays for a year. I think that's a little fast for him, right? See, even for like Dave Canales, he's kind of like new on the scene, right? I think that'll be a big jump for him and, to get a head coaching job right away. Mike Kafka could be in that list as well. So you're looking at, 7 or 8 candidates there that are very qualified. And I think a lot of people wouldn't be surprised if they were a head coach this year. Who do you think is most likely to land a gig and most likely to be left without one when this hiring cycle is over?
I could see Vrabel sitting out a year and sort of hitting the reset button. I don't think that's crazy. I don't see him.
He's also young enough to do it.
Taking a defensive coordinator job. He also may go the collegiate route, maybe serve as a consultant for a year and then jump back into the NFL level.
I don't see Vrabel going DC. I think he would just take the year off before he would be a DC.
Well, or once again, you've seen a lot of these roles in college where guys, they don't even go to the campus from home remotely. They serve as consultants. So, I could see him do that. And remember, Bill O'Brien just went to Ohio State.
Yep.
Vrabel's a former Ohio State guy. So I could see him perhaps serving as a consultant in some capacity. I think Ben Johnson is likely.
And I think Vrabel can be picky, too. Like, he doesn't have to take a
that's
job
more of a
he
reason.
doesn't like,
Yeah,
correct?
And that's why I think if you sit out like Sean Payton did and then you just wait to see what's attractive for you the following year, who knows? Belichick may do that, too. It's hard to imagine him being without football for a year, but if the Atlanta Falcons doesn't enamor him, he could also sit out.
At his age, it's tough, though. He wants to break the record. He's 71 years old. Sitting out a year at this age, I think, would be a tough pill for him to swallow.
Well, no, I agree. If Shula's record is his ultimate goal, which I'm sure it is, I think this gives you at least an opportunity to get halfway home because he needs 15 to break the record. You could win 8 games with Atlanta this past season.
Sure.
Next season,
they
should
won
say.
7 last year. Right?
Yeah. Well, plus the division is not overwhelming. There's no juggernaut there. He could easily win the division and get to the playoffs. They've got pieces there, and I could see them making a move for a quarterback. So, yeah, if that's his priority, but if he doesn't love how things are presented and he says to himself, Mike McCarthy has an expiring contract, want to wait to see if Jerry after next season, Bill could do that too. It's not crazy. I mean, he can wait around and see whether or not that happens. I know there was a lot of rumors, and that's why it's kind of interesting. Sean Payton went to Denver. If he would have waited another year, maybe he could have got the Chargers job and worked with Justin Herbert right now.
Or the Dallas job. Because if Sean Payton's sitting there, maybe he doesn't stick with Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones.
Yeah, but the difference is you'd have to make a trade for Sean under those circumstances. I think there was another year remaining. I'm
not sure if there
on
was
the deal.
I know there was last year. I'm not sure were there 2 years left, though?
I could be mistaken. Maybe there was only a year.
You might be right. I'm not sure,
but
to be honest.
The bottom line is a little bit different in terms of going after Belichick versus going after Sean Payton. But I think I'd be surprised if Ben Johnson doesn't get a job, the Lions offensive coordinator. He was a big name last season. So I'd be surprised if he lasts an entire cycle again. But Vrabel's the guy I could see taking a year off. I think of all the people we mentioned.
I agree with you. And it looks like Belichick, the only place he's interviewed with is Atlanta. So it's either there or nothing for him. And they are also hot and heavy on Harbaugh. So if Harbaugh goes to the Chargers, I would not be surprised if shortly thereafter then you see Belichick
very possible
go to Atlanta. All right, so let's move on very quickly. College All-Star games coming up. Practices start over the weekend down in Frisco for the Shrine Bowl. I'll be down there. And then we head to Mobile for practices next week. And then the Shrine Bowl the game is late next week. And then the Senior Bowl is not this Saturday, the following Saturday. So make sure you go check those out. But I'll be out there. I'll be trying to call in here and do reports on Big Blue Kickoff throughout the week. And just a couple things I want to note going in, and go check out draft season. It just got posted. Tony Pauline and I do a full breakdown of all these guys and all these positions. So make sure you go check that out. But a couple of things to note. When you go to watch these practices, Lance, same thing when you're here watching NFL practices. You want to watch the one-on-ones, right? And the sets of wide receivers and defensive backs and defensive linemen, and especially the offensive line class, which is the best individual position group I've ever seen at the Senior Bowl. It's that loaded. They're going to be a lot of fun. I mean, all these offensive linemen, Lance, could be first-round picks, all right? Talisi Fuaga, the offensive tackle from Oregon State. Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Graham Barton, the tackle from Duke, who's probably going to go to guard. He has a chance to sneak into the back end of the first round. Jordan Morgan, the tackle out of Arizona. Kingsley Suamatai out of Brigham Young. Troy Fatanu out of Washington. And then even Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, who's a center. Those are all guys just on the offensive line that could be first-round picks. You're looking at 6 or 7 guys just in one position group at this offensive line that could go in the first round. Then you have a bunch of second-round guys. Cooper Beebe, a guard. Zach Frazier is a day 2 guy, West Virginia. Dominic Puney out of Kansas could be a day 2 guy. Those are all interior offensive linemen. So, Giant fans, go pay attention. You could have your second-round and third-round offensive linemen sitting there going down in Mobile. Now, Joe Alton, Olu Fashanu, who are the 2 presumptive top offensive linemen that are going to get picked, they're not there. That's fine. You got a bunch of other guys that are going to be really, really good football players. So that's a group to watch. And then, defensive backlands, as you well know, very rarely do guys go 4 years at cornerback and then come out. You got a lot of, redshirt sophomores, true juniors, stuff like that. And now the Senior Bowl has opened it up a little bit this year. You don't have to be a senior anymore. But this is one of the best groups of defensive backs. Both Penn State defensive backs are very good. Johnny Dixon and Kalen King, they're excellent. Local flavor, Max Melton out of Rutgers, who's a nice player. He'll be there. Ennis Rackstraw out of Missouri, he could be a first-round pick. Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, he's going to be a first-round pick. So you have a lot of really good defensive backs. And then Ladd McConkey out of Georgia is a really good receiver. He's going to be there. Xavier Legette out of South Carolina is 6'5", and he's going to run sub 4.45. He's that fast. So that's a guy that's going to be there. And then the guy that Drake May was throwing to all year, Devontae Walker, is going to be there. Roman Wilson, who just won a national championship. So just a lot of good one-on-one opportunities, a couple first-round defensive tackles from Texas and Murphy and Devontae Sweat. So this is as good of a Senior Bowl roster. I didn't even mention the quarterbacks, Michael Penix and Bo Nix. This is as good of a Senior Bowl roster, Lance, as I've ever seen. You're going to have a bunch of first-round picks, and then day 2 is going to be loaded up with these Senior Bowl players. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, and we see this every season. There's always a few guys that emerge, and it's not because of what they do in the game. It's because of what they do in practice every week. I mean, I'll give you an example. Jaden Reed, who went to the Packers last year, he had a really good Senior Bowl week. Sidney Brown, who went to the Eagles in round 3,
and
he had a good Senior Bowl week.
Great point on Jaden Reed, because that year Michigan State's offense was a disaster. So his production wasn't great.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with him. They just were a disaster offensively, but then he showed at the Senior Bowl what he could do.
Sure, and that's why these one-on-ones are critical even for members of the scouting department and the coaching staff, because you also see good against good. The caliber of the competition that these players are going against is very high. It's not as if they're throwing them in against third and fourth stringers from maybe some of the powerhouse teams. So I think you get a better gauge on a daily basis, considering the reps are consistent, what this player could do. And also, I mean, if you're going to draft a wide receiver, you want to see separation within practice. You're going to draft a cornerback and you're playing a man-to-man defensive set. You want to see that he could stick with his guy. It's no different when you see the battle in the trenches. If the offensive lineman can't hold up on containing the edge rushers, then maybe that's a red flag, regardless of how good of offense he was a part of. Or if he wasn't necessarily a splash player on defense because what they asked him to do within the scheme was not get after the quarterback, but then you see the one-on-ones and he's doing damage, maybe that's more appealing that he could fit right into your schematic. So that's why the practices for the Senior Bowl are so critical. And I think if you ask any members of the coaching staff and the scouting departments, they'll tell you the same thing. I mean, the game is nice, but I don't really think it holds much weight in comparison to what you see in the days prior.
No, most of the people are out of there on Thursday night.
No, but I mean, some do hang around. For example,
Gettleman
hung around to watch Daniel Jones, if memory serves me correctly, in the actual game. Not that, once again, I think that made the difference, but he did want to see him in a game setting, but most are focused in, obviously, on the day-to-day operation and practice.
Yeah, and seeing the guys operate at practice, the intensity they practice at, all that sort of stuff is really fun to see. All right, guys, go check out our other podcasts. You have the Giants Huddle podcast. That's brought to you by Citizens. Interviews with analysts and Giants, players, coaches, former Giants, former coaches, you name it. Arjun Menon's up there right now, a PFF analyst. We kind of do a primer on what the Giants' offseason resources are and how it ranks in the league. He has them ranked number 5, fifth most in terms of draft capital and in terms of cap space and the ability to restructure contracts as well. We talk about all that stuff on the Giants Huddle podcast. Go check it out. Giants.com/podcast, your favorite podcast platform, the Giants app. And check out our other podcast, which is now rip-roaring, ready to go. That's draft season. Tony, Pauline, and I do everything NFL draft. Our last episode just went up now. Check it out if you're listening live when the show is done. We do a full-out preview of the Senior Bowl and Shrine Game and the players in both those games. That's brought to you by Visa. So make sure you go check that out. All right, 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Mikey in L.A. He'll lead us off. Hey, Mikey.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? How you doing?
What's going on?
Yeah, first-time caller, bro.
Well, thanks for calling in, man. What do you got?
Yeah, for sure. I had a draft day question.
Sure.
So, yeah, my thoughts. Let's say, hypothetically, the Bears stay and they end up taking Caleb or Drake or whoever to be the new franchise guy and they don't know what to do with Fields. Is there a world where the Giants could trade the Seattle second for Fields, exercising his fifth-year option to keep him under a rookie contract while we're still under contract with DJ and let them duke it out, or kind of see where he takes the team while DJ's still coming up in recovery?
From a mechanical perspective, is that possible? Yes. Whoever acquires Justin Fields in a trade. Now, the question is when that trade would happen, right? Because the fifth-year deadline, I believe, is before
usually in the
draft
spring.
day.
Yeah.
So that would you would have to complete that. And look, if the Bears are going to do that, they're going to move Fields sooner rather than later, I would think. So, yes, in theory, whoever then trades for Fields, as long as it's prior to that fifth-year deadline, and Lance is going to check out exactly when it is, they could do that, yes. But then it does get tricky, right? Because even that fifth-year option, you're still looking, I think the fifth-year option is $20-something million at this point. And Lance, check that out, too, what the quarterback number is. But it's not small. It is fairly large. So then you're still managing those two cap hits at the same time. So is it possible? Yes. But then you're going to have to make a decision on paying Fields shortly thereafter, after that fifth-year option is up. So it does add another complication from a financial team-building perspective. But in terms of mechanics, is that a possibility? Yes.
I see $23 million for the fifth-year option for quarterback.
$23 million, thank you, Pearson.
And I think it's right after the draft because last year was May 2nd was the
so
deadline.
maybe it is after
so
the
it
draft.
literally
Okay.
is like a day or two after the draft.
All right, good call, Lance. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that could be a day of thing. And
Yes.
then next year is still his fourth year, right? So what's his cap for the fourth year?
I mean, as a
DJ's
first-round
cap
pick,
is-
his fourth-year cap hit is probably somewhere around $6 or $7 million, would be my bet. But I can check that.
Okay. Yeah, that could work out because we know that Joe, based on the last 2 years of draft, he's not someone who's going to reach. If the first three quarterbacks are gone, he's not going to pull another, or he either trade up or trade back for him.
Yeah, his cap hit next year would be $6 million in 2024.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I know that next year will be Daniel's second year, which is where the guaranteed is done, right?
The guarantee is not completely done, but there is a window to get out with not a ridiculous amount of dead money.
After the second, right? Okay,
Yes.
So if we did take Fields next year on his $6 million, while Daniel still has his big cap, that's probably the time to do it, just to kind of see where Fields can take us if anywhere. But,
that would be like a $50 million combined cap number with both quarterbacks together, which is high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is, but it's probably still not the highest.
Believe it or not, the way these contracts are structured, that would probably be, in terms of if you count that as one player, that would probably be the third or fourth highest number next year in the league.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was my only question for today, guys. Well, I appreciate you taking my
call. Mikey, good question. Appreciate the call. And he said the Seattle pick. I think someone would offer more than that for Justin Fields.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a player with starting experience who's still young and has not reached his potential. I think it's going to take more than that.
At worst, they're getting a high second-round pick. And I think, I've mentioned the Steelers before. I think that's a team that has a late first-round pick that would consider something like that. I'll look at the draft order here real quick.
I also think if the Giants make a trade like that, that means that they do not feel very good about Daniel Jones. That would be my interpretation.
You're right, because if you trade for Justin Fields, right, you're basically, I mean, what are you going to bench Justin Fields then? Like,
to me,
a
team that trades for Justin Fields says Fields is coming in, he's going to be our starter day one. I don't think the Giants right now are in that position.
Right.
So I'd be very surprised if they make a move for that.
Like, I'd be shocked if the Falcons didn't offer their second round.
Yeah, but that team makes sense because right away you move in Justin Fields, he's your starter.
Well, I'm making the point of why the Seattle second round pick wouldn't be enough. Right?
Sure.
Because a team like the Falcons at the top of the second round would probably make that offer. I could see a team like the Vikings, who are trying to figure out their future at the position. If they say, you know what, maybe we don't want Kirk Cousins back, we prefer a younger guy in there, I could see that being a team that would maybe make a move and offer an early second round pick. How about the Broncos? Sean Payton's never shy about being aggressive going for players, right? They have the 12th pick in the first round. That's another team.
Well, the Raiders, too.
How about the Raiders? You took the words right out of my mouth. Another team that's going to be looking for a quarterback. So there are a lot of teams there that would have a better pick than the Giants' Seattle-owned from Seattle second-round pick. So I think, again, I don't think that's a really good fit. I don't think that's going to happen, and we're not speculating on somebody on another team. We're just answering your question here. But to me, that does not, I don't know, between the money factor and then Jones coming back, they're both expected to start next year. It just doesn't it makes more sense to me to spend a higher pick on a younger guy, that if he sits for a little while, that's okay. Like, Justin Fields doesn't need to sit. Yeah. The guy started in the league for 3 years.
Well, and also it'd be a lower cap hit, too, depending on who you draft and where you draft. That's why I think Fields is going to go to a team that realistically doesn't see a pathway to get high in the draft to take the guy they want.
Bingo.
And then that's a good way. I don't want to say it's settling, but it's still a very attractive option because you're going to have to give up draft capital anyway to get Justin Fields, but you have a more proven commodity that comes in that could actually start for your team immediately.
201-939-4513. Good question, though, Mikey. Excellent. Let's go to Cliff in New York. He's up next. Hi, Cliff.
Hey, guys. Great to hear your stuff today, as usual. When I told Pearson I want to talk about trading down, but before I get to that, I'm hoping that all that talk about the coaches that you did opens up some opportunities for Dable to hire people that are better than the options that he has now because he doesn't know what his options are yet. And
well, I don't see how those would if anything, it would reduce options, right? Because these head coaches then would hire their own coordinators, and that would take people off the board that the Giants could hire.
They would make a lateral move to be a DC or an OC.
Who would make a
lateral
move?
Who would? You talk about a head coach that lost his job?
A guy that didn't get the head coaching opportunity. You were running through that list.
Oh, no. Those guys aren't leaving their current jobs for a lateral move. Like, Raheem Morris is not leaving his current job. Bobby Slowick's not leaving his current job. Mike McDonald's not leaving his current job.
Yeah, they're currently employed.
Yeah, those guys aren't going
I mean, the only guy that you're looking at is Mike Vrabel, for example, but I find it hard to believe that he's going to settle for a defensive coordinator job. Okay. He's probably best just sitting out for a season or, once again, going the college route. As far as the other head coaches that lost their jobs, I mean, Ron Rivera, I know Rivera has come out and says he wants to get back into coaching. Maybe Rivera is the exception. I could see Rivera.
He's going to interview with Philly, right, for their DC job?
Which makes sense for Sirianni. Right. So, I mean, it's possible. But then again, I mean, we haven't heard any rumors about the Giants bringing him in for an interview. But Rivera's the type of guy, I could see him taking a DC job who was a previous head coach and maybe moving laterally, as you pointed out. I don't think a lot of the other guys, though, Cliff, are going to make such a move.
Okay. Well, Rivera would appeal to me, that's for sure.
Well, and that's why I said that would be one guy that I think perhaps would make sense under the circumstances.
Sounds like we lost Cliff there?
We got him still. At least I'm hearing him.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
So the perspective I'm feeling overall is very similar to when Joe Schoen first got here, when I was saying, oh, boy, I want to really see what this guy can do with a lot of draft capital. And going into the third season for him, I'm feeling pretty much the same way because, it's easy to forget. Nobody wants to hear about long-term projects, but when Gettleman took over, the situation was the recent draft picks not only weren't re-signing with the Giants, but they weren't having jobs anywhere else in the league. That was the low point that Gettleman started with.
Well, no, and right. That was before Dave came on. That was happening.
Right.
Correct.
Right, and that was what we were told. He was brought on to fix or to start fixing anyway. And he had to be let go. We all understand. Phil Simms was the one that helped me understand why he had to be let go. Just by the way, when he was asked during the Jake not from the insurance company debacle, he said, "Well, do you think the Giants have to make a change?" And Phil said, "Oh, they have to." The way he said it, it was like that people knew that some progress had been made, but the train wreck was so severe. So anyway, in comes Joe Schoen, and I'm very pumped. And I'm trying to get a handle on and I hear from you, John, that you don't think this is a one-year project for Joe or 2 years, and you said 3 years for what?
No. Len said 3 years, not me. Len said 3 years yesterday.
No, I mean not yesterday. I mean all along you were telling how much of what the length of the project was for Joe Schoen.
Oh, you mean when he arrived? Yes, yeah. I mean, I termed it at least a 3-year deal for sure.
Right. So what I'm hoping for is that this year is maybe a turning point in the roster because it looks like you can't. There were some impact players, and I wanted to ask Lance about the definition of the impact players from the draft, which are not first-round picks. That starts in round 3, Lance.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're going after. I mean, you can find impactful guys in second and third round. I mean, that's not a stretch. That's not asking for much. I think you go further back, it's more of a pleasant surprise than an expectation. But you could find guys in the second and third round. I mean, look at the Lions, for example. Look at their draft class this year. I mean, they have a lot of depth that they brought in, and all of those guys got out on the field and contributed. Remember, it's twofold.
Right.
It's not about where you draft the player. It's also how much of an opportunity are you giving that player immediately in year one. And I think we've seen that with respect to the Giants. But, for example, a guy like Dane Belton, okay? Dane Belton had a really nice finish to the season. Earlier in the year, he didn't play. So if you're going to draft a guy, the next question is, are you putting him on the field? Or are you having him watch, learn, and observe? It's a twofold question there. That's what it comes down to. You could draft a guy in the 4th round, in the 3rd round, you don't play him, really doesn't mean much of anything at the end of the day.
Well, if you're developing him, if you're smart, I got pumped for Joe Shane being a judge of talent, and with his scouting background and everything, and he had some experience with developing players, or at least watching it in various stops in his career. And I'm hoping that he really knows how to do that. So for impact player for me from second through, I consider Slayton in a 5 has had some level of an impact. These guys don't have to impact immediately for me to be an impact player,
Well, but if you want to, but Cliff, if you want to make the jump that you're talking about,
thank you, Cliff. Appreciate the call.
I don't think then you can wait 3 or 4 years down the line for them to make that level of an impact. I think the whole point is you draft them within 2 years, you see something out of them. For example, Wan'Dale Robinson, who was a second-round pick in 2022, unfortunately he got hurt, tore his ACL his rookie year, but this year, at least the second half of the season, I think we saw an impact out of him, and he's a guy to watch. Hopefully he can stay on the field for a full year in 2024. But no one says draft a guy in the 3rd round and then wait 2 to 3 years later to actually see him start to scratch the surface. I think you want a far more immediate impact than that, especially if you're the Giants and where you are positioned with respect to the rest of the NFL landscape.
Hey, Giant fans, take your fandom to the next level with a Giant season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Scott, New Mexico is up next, then Leroy and Charleston's up after that. Scott, what's going on?
Hey, guys, how you doing today?
What's up, Scott?
All right.
I was kind of depressed after listening to yesterday's broadcast. Len said we have a mess so far as the lineup, and Hugo said Saquon Barkley wasn't worth the money we were going to pay him. I respect both of those guys, but I don't think the team's that big a mess, and I don't know who you're going to replace Saquon Barkley with. Before I get to my main points, I wanted to ask you both a question about Mike Kafka. Do you think he'll return to the Giants? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but based on all the openings there are, do you think Mike Kafka will be coming back?
Well, if I had to guess right now, do I think he's going to get one of the head coaching jobs? As we talked about, there's a lot of really guys with a lot of experience that are highly qualified. I think it's going to be tough to get one of the 5 jobs left. I hope for Mike's sake that he does. I think he's a great coach. I think he's wonderful, but I think you prepare for the fact. And the expectation, not the expectation, but I think you prepare as though he's not going to get one of those jobs. You also prepare for the contingency that he is. And if he doesn't get one of those jobs, I know there's been, whispers and rumors out there. I don't know anything that any of that's true. I would assume that if he doesn't get one of those head coaching jobs, that he's going to be back.
Well, time is of the essence, too, Scott. You have to look at it from this standpoint. The more time that elapses, the more positions get filled, and then you don't have as many choices. And here's the other thing. If Kafka wants to leave and it's not a head coaching position, the Giants need to give him permission to do that, remember, okay? Because he's still under contract with the team. He's not a free agent where he just gets up and goes wherever he wants. So there are limitations and restrictions even if you want to go down that road. And, normally I would think if coordinators part ways with teams, given the fact that we're already at the tail end of January, early February, those decisions normally are made by now. That's just my personal opinion based on track record. Could crazier things happen? Sure. But I think where we are on the calendar right now, I'd be very surprised.
Okay. Let me get to my main points. I always think that when you build an offensive line, I know you always start with the left tackle, but I always think that the interior of the offensive line really is important. And the reason being is pass rushers now are trying to go up the middle to limit what the quarterback can do, and that usually will run into the pass rushers on the outside.
No, Scott, you're right. A lack of interior protection actually hurts you more than a lack of exterior protection, but guards are easier to find than tackles. That would be the difference in that conversation.
Well, you mentioned a guy I'm really high on, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. He's 330, 6'4", and if you read his bio and what they've talked about him, he's the kind of guy that once he locks onto a defensive player, he doesn't let go.
He's a mauler. He's a mauler.
And I'd like to see him hopefully in the second round. If he's available, that the Giants take him. Because I think the best way to approach the offensive line is through the draft. The only player in free agency I'm looking for the Giants to take, and hopefully they can mortgage the team if they have to, but that's Bryce Huff of the Jets. And if they can get him, they would have a diamond in the rough. That's the guy that I'd be looking for the Giants to take.
Well, the problem, Scott, is that I'm not sure how much in the rough he's going to be based on how teams like to give out money to edge rushers in free agency. No, I'm curious what the price tag is going to be for him, because if you look at the non-sack pass rush metrics like win rate and pressure rate and stuff like that, he's near the top of the league. So I wonder how teams are going to view him given some of the underlying metrics versus the actual sack production, which is good but not off the charts. I'm curious to see what his price tag is going to be. Like, would it shock me if he got upwards of 18 or 20 million? It would not.
Okay. So
it also depends on the Jets and their level of interest in bringing it back, too. I'm sure when a guy gets 10 sacks, that doesn't necessarily just get hidden and overshadowed in terms of how they evaluate their own guys.
Now, they also drafted Will McDonald in the first round last year, so my guess is that that's kind of like you're bringing the young guy to replace the veteran, but who knows? You're right. I mean, he was so good last year, they might want to bring him back.
And they pride themselves on depth and having multiple options, too, up front, so they can rotate
guys. He didn't sound like he wanted to come back to the Jets unless there was money involved. So,
money changes that, though. You may not want to come back, and then a team shows you the dollar bill signs, and all of a sudden you're more than happy coming back. So I wait to see how the process plays out before I put much stock in that.
Okay. The question, and then I'm going to take it off the air. I look at teams like Green Bay, who almost beat San Francisco, and how important are the first and second and third round drafts? If you look at their, and this relates to their to the wide receivers we have, for example, Slayton, Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson. If you look at Green Bay's wide receivers under Matt LaFleur this year,
they're all young.
Romeo Dobbs drafted 4th round. Botavian Wicks 5th round. The 2 tight ends, Kraft and Musgrave, 3rd and 2nd round respectively. So it can be done.
Now, Jaden Reed was just the dud. Don't leave out Jaden Reed just because you don't like when he was drafted. Right. He was a 2nd round pick, and Christian Watson was a 2nd round pick.
Chris Watson was a 2nd round draft.
So just to add that up, in that wide receiver room, you have 3 2nd round picks, 2 wide receivers and a tight end, and 2 3rd round picks and a 4th round pick. So that is a lot of draft capital put into those 2 rooms.
But they're all effective is really the key. And what I'm worried about is talent evaluation, how we do it. My biggest thing, John Michael Schmitz was my original question to Pearson. I was wondering when I was looking at, for example, Tyler Linderbaum, who I know you guys weren't that enthusiastic about. He's now an all-pro center. He's not allowed a sack.
Whoa. No, we would like Tyler Linderbaum. We didn't like him as a top 10 pick, all right, because he was a center.
Right.
But picking him in the mid to end of the first round was an excellent pick, and I praised the Ravens profusely for that selection, but you don't pick centers in the top 10.
Right. So what I'm wondering is, with the Giant line, John Michael Schmitz, I think, has a lot of talent, but he allowed 5 sacks, was 5th most in the NFL, and 30 pressures. I think he'll grow and get better. But the 2 guards that they need to get, I think they need to get through the draft and not through free agents.
Why is that? Why? Why do you say that? Because to me, the guy, Scott, just real quick, because my theory in free agency is that you target the critical, non-premium positions in free agency because they're not going to cost you an arm and a leg, right? You know, it's impossible to find a great wide receiver or pass rusher in free agency because either they never become available or because they're too expensive. But positions like linebacker, safety, guard, center, those are the positions you can target in free agency because you're not going to break the bank, and you could still get a guy that is like for example, look what the Seahawks got in Julian Love last year.
Right.
Well, I mean, look at the Giants with David Boss.
Bobby Okereke.
Yeah, I mean, even Kevin Zeitler, who was a solid guy, and look at what he's doing in Baltimore right now. So
if you look at the way Joe Shane's been drafting, he's retained most of his draft picks. In both years that he's made the picks. I think 12 in last year's.
Right.
14 plays were retained. So the way he's doing it through the draft, I think, is the right way.
Well, I mean, Scott, keep in mind, too, he hasn't exactly had a chance. None of his draft picks have become free agents yet.
Well, I think he's talking about but you're talking about the guys that are drafted and make the team, right? Is that what you're referring to, Scott?
Correct.
Well, but also keep in mind what he inherited. He inherited, a roster with a lot of question marks. In all likelihood, you're going to keep the guys you bring in because there's not a lot to choose from. As the years go by, that philosophy could very well change. And one of the things, Scott, that I wanted to point out, your point is well taken about the Packers, but if you truly want to go to why they competed with San Francisco, it was the play of the offensive line and Aaron Jones running the football.
And
if you go back,
it was Jordan Love is a big part of that too.
But Love threw for less than 200 yards. It wasn't a pass-happy game. They were moving the ball on the ground in those early drives, the three that got up and down the field.
But look what Jordan Love did against Dallas the week before.
No, but what I'm saying, but he specifically said San Francisco.
I got you.
Okay, so I'm focusing on that playoff game. They were not airing it out over the Niners defense. They were winning up front, and they were running the ball.
That's true.
That's why they competed with the Niners.
Anyways, I'll let you guys go, but my whole point is I think the draft, to me, is the way to go to try to get the players. And as you said, John, there's a plethora of offensive linemen that will be available that the Giants can develop.
Scott, look, and thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Yes, you can't bring in 2 guards via free agency. That's probably not going to be what you do. I think you sign one and you draft one. Maybe you draft 2. Maybe you draft one early, you draft one late. Guy you develop later on, and you still have, McKeithen and Azudu in house. You hope maybe one of those guys can emerge in their 3rd year. But, yeah, I think you address it that way, but you can't address every position via the draft. You ain't got enough picks.
Well, that's why you got to balance it between both.
I mean, look, and we talked about this, Howard, yesterday, and then Leroy will get to you next. Stop me where I'm wrong, Lance. Needs for this team. The depth at wide receiver is good, but you still don't have that 1A guy that teams have to game plan against. Correct?
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Tight end, you got a full room. Bellinger and Waller, you want to come back with those 2 guys as your tight ends, I think you're fine. Okay?
Yeah.
Offensive line, we talked about the issues at guard. Okay? Those are 2 big needs. All right? Running back, you don't know what the need is going to be with Saquon Barkley. He could be here. He might not be here. If he's not here, you're going to have to add somebody at running back. It's not going to be just Eric Gray, here's the job, and Matt Breida.
Though you should know that going into the draft.
Right.
What that situation is.
But my point is that it could be a need, depending on what happens with Saquon Barkley, right? So there's offense for you. Now go to defense. With Azeez Ojulari's injury history, Jihad Ward's a free agent. Don't you need an edge rusher at some point, whether in free agency or in the draft, to add to that room?
Well, also Ojulari's going into the final year of his contract, too. That's more of a reason why.
All those things together, 1,000%. I'm with you. That's a need. If Adoree Jackson comes back, who's your starting quarterback? Exactly, across from Deonte Banks. I mean, Nick McLeod did a nice job. I don't know if you want to go into camp with him as your starter. At least you want competition at that spot. So corner could very well be a need. I think you're set at inside linebacker. Who's your 3-technique defensive tackle? You have a run stuffer in Nacho.
Yep.
Dexter's Dexter, monster nose tackle. A'Shawn Robinson's a free agent, but he's not a 3-technique pass rusher either. So you need a 3-technique pass rusher. That's another need. Then you go to safety. If Xavier McKinney's not back, who's your second starting safety? Dane Belton can slide in there, but I think that's his position where if Dane Belton wins the job, great, but I think you want some competition there, right?
Well, I think there's room to maybe add a veteran free agent, I would think.
That's
I think
fine.
You give Belton the job, you have him and Pinnock play, and then you bring in an established guy to support both of them.
My point here is
I think that could be a solution.
I'd stop counting. But I think that's, 7 different spots where there's legitimate big-time need? Well, guess what? You're not finding 7 players that can fill those needs in the draft. You're just don't have enough high picks to do that. So it has to be a combination of free agency and the draft, and you prioritize which spots that you want to fill with what. And again, my strategy, Lance, and you didn't have a chance to comment on this, is in free agency, it's better to go after, or you almost have to go after, the non-premium spots because the really good players at the premium spots, A, usually never become available to begin with, or B, if they do, are astronomically expensive. So it makes more sense to go after those non-premium positions, safety, even running back to a certain extent, right? Yeah. Linebacker, the Giants don't have a specific need there. But guard, safety, those are the spots where maybe in free agency you can attack those positions a little bit, not break the bank, bring in a few quality players for a little less money that can start for you and be starting caliber, while those premium spots, corner, wide receiver, offensive tackle, pass rusher, those are the guys you want to attack in the draft and try to get them on those rookie contracts where they become very, very valuable to you, like the Giants did with Kayvon Thibodeau, like they did with Andrew Thomas, like they're trying to do with Evan Neal,
Deonte
Banks as well. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the logical move. The skill set positions where you want to get your playmakers, if you could find them in the draft and then you could develop them, at least you'll have them on the books for a few years where they're not putting a great deal of stress on your salary cap. I'd also throw in interior defensive linemen. You could probably go through free agency, too, if you wanted. I don't think that's going to necessarily break the piggy bank, depending on, of course, what that player does in the track record.
For example, like Justin Matabikwe, who is a three-technique defensive tackle, that dude's going to make $20 million.
Well, he's also coming from a really good defense, too, which is going to help his cause. Maybe if you go after somebody from a defense that doesn't necessarily have the reputation as he does, you don't necessarily have to spend as much. But interior offensive line, interior defensive line, safety, running back, all of those, to me, are positions you could target in free agency.
Agreed.
Where you can then leave the draft capital going towards players who could very well be more impactful, but it makes more sense to balance your books that way. Because then, remember, you're going to also have to start to make decisions on some of the players you mentioned. Do you want to retain them? For example, McKinney, are you bringing him back? What's the market for him? That's going to then eat into, John, the availability you have to target some of the other free agents. So, that's the other balancing mechanism that you got to take into consideration here.
201-939-4513. Let's go to Leroy in Charleston. What's going on, Leroy?
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're good, and Leroy, you owe me one. I almost did my Leroy Jenkins chant, but I decided not to.
Well, listen, I got a couple of things I like to ask, man. It's like, as I was listening, talking about Joe Shane, and I'd like to see Shane get at least 2 more years beyond this. I mean, if you remember, Shane had to come in and get that cap in order.
Leroy, I would be shocked, just real quick, I would be blown away shocked if the Giants moved on from their general manager after just 3 years. That would be, that would be shocking to me. That would be shocking.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to get that out the way, man. Yeah. I would be disappointed if they did that too. Now the other thing is Jerome Henderson. Where's he at? Isn't he the linebackers coach?
No, he's the secondary coach.
Yeah, defensive back coach, and he is still on the staff. He's still on the contract, and he interviewed for the, according to reports, he interviewed for the Giants' defensive coordinator spot.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, I would love to see them just move him up. He knows the players, and I feel like, a guy like that, he has probably some good ideas, things he'd like to do with that defense already.
I love Rome.
Why bring in?
I would be thrilled if Jerome Henderson got the job. I think he's a great coach.
Okay, good, man. Because everything I heard about him has been positive.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's responsible for developing a lot of the young players at that position. I don't think anybody is thinking low of him. It's just a matter of, and I brought this up on previous shows, does Brian Dable want somebody with previous play calling experience? He's never called plays, Leroy. That's the big difference. He's a really good positional coach. He has a wealth of experience. He even did a little scouting at some point in his career. He's never called plays.
Too, yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, but I hear you, but, just look at what Antonio Pierce said down. He was a linebackers coach or something.
Yeah, but he didn't call plays, though. No, but Leroy, I disagree with you. There is a distinct difference between being the head man and delegating responsibilities and motivating players versus calling plays. Calling plays is an art. And case in point, the Eagles, last year promoted Brian Johnson, their QB coach. So he was an internal guy, and he replaced Shane Steichen, who got the Colts job, and now they're moving on from Brian Johnson. So you got to sometimes, you have to think about that. And this is not a knock on Jerome Henderson. I'm with John. I think he's a valuable component on the staff, and you hope guys like that eventually get opportunities. I'm a big proponent of continuity, but I think sometimes you also need to say, just because you're maintaining continuity, can they now handle calling the plays, which once again is a different dynamic during the course of a game.
And also leading a staff, right? You have to then delegate and lead a staff, which is something he hasn't done either. So that's something the Giants will have to decide, Leroy, whether or not he's capable of doing that.
Well, he has to get an opportunity sometime, man. That's all I'm saying.
No, sure. I don't think anybody's disputing that. Yeah.
No, we agree with you. We're just giving the other side of the coin in terms of what the debate is as you decide whether or not to make certain hires.
Okay. Thank you, guys, man.
No, great call, Leroy.
Right. Yeah.
Appreciate the call. We do have an open line, folks. We have about 7 minutes to go. If you want to give us a call, we can take them at 201-939-4513. And that is an interesting debate, right? And, the other thing that's interesting, too, that I take a look at as we do all this, we always praise coaches, and I'm one of the first people to do it, to go hire people outside of your tree, right? You don't want to just hire your friends. You want to get a varied staff. But look, the Wink situation here, go to Carolina, where that was a hodgepodge staff, where it wasn't, Doug Peterson bringing in all of his guys. They hired from all over the stuff. Wait,
you're talking about Jacksonville? I lost you.
I'm
Doug Peterson in
Carolina.
Sorry,
not the Frank Reich. Frank Reich in Carolina.
Okay,
sorry.
That's why.
Wrong.
I lost you there.
Wrong. Former Philadelphia Eagles offensive coach. So Frank Reich, they did the all-star coaching thing down there in Carolina, right? It wasn't a bunch of Frank Reich guys. They hired, McCown came from there. The guy who ended up becoming the play caller came from a different spot. The defensive coordinator, I believe, was held over from the prior coaching staff, Evero, right? And
Evero came from a different place.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Evero came, again, he wasn't related to Reich, right?
No, okay, you're talking about previous experience working with Frank Reich. Yeah.
And that whole thing and all the sniping coming into that building. So I do think, and the point where I'm trying to get to through this long, winding point, is that there are benefits, too, from hiring guys in your circle that and that they know you, you know them, you know how you work, you know what the workflow is going to be, what the personalities are, you trust each other. Guys are going to go in, they're going to do their thing, they understand the structure. While if you bring in other guys, they come in with new ideas. I think that's a really good thing. They maybe make you uncomfortable, they challenge you on certain things, and that can make you a better head coach, right? But at the same time, there might not be that chemistry there and the trust, to your point, where everything ends up working out. So I think those are the interesting things that you're weighing here as you decide, do I bring in an outsider? Do I bring in somebody I know? Do I promote from within? These are all the types of things that you have to consider.
Well, I think Dable has experience on both sides just from what he experienced here in New York, right? I mean, he inherited Thomas McGahee, but then parted ways with him, and then the offensive line coach change and Bobby Johnson. He goes back with him to Buffalo. So he could say there's good, there's bad, there's indifference across the board in terms of everything that he's gone through. And he's also seen Belichick in New England promote from within. Belichick's a big guy in terms of just grooming, learning both sides of the ball, and moving up the ladder. So I think Brian's got enough on his plate to say, I've seen it done in a variety of ways. Does the Wink experience move the needle more towards, okay, we went outside my box, so now let's stay within the playhouse? Perhaps, but I would not think that would scare him away to say, I'm not going to now evaluate people who I have no connection to, because I don't think you want to box yourself into the corner.
Well, remember,
I think you want to leave your opportunities across the board.
He never actually coached with Carmen Brasillo, who they brought in to be the offensive line coach. So now they have common roots, both coming from the Patriots, but they were never on a staff together. They never worked together.
But he could speak to people who worked with him from New England, even a Josh McDaniels, for example, who Dable knows.
Oh, a million people that were on the staff in New England, he'd be able to talk to. He'll call Bill Belichick.
Sure.
And Bill Belichick will tell him what he's all about. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting part of this, that, figuring out what the right balance is with those types of decisions.
Yeah, and, once again, it also depends on, I don't know, I don't think, has Jerome Henderson, I don't remember anybody asking him, and maybe you recall this, does he has aspirations to be a play caller? Not to say that he doesn't, but remember, Jerome Henderson's been in the NFL for quite some time.
I have not heard that asked, but I think everyone does.
No, I'm assuming, because remember, Wink said multiple times, I want to be a head coach again.
Right.
Right? Well, not again. He wants to be a head coach. That was brought up in press conference after press conference. I don't remember that being brought up in conversation with Jerome Henderson, and that's not to say that he doesn't, once again, want to be a play caller, but I guess what I'm saying is I haven't heard him publicly campaign for it, John. I'm getting at. Some guys, every time a microphone's in front of them, they're going to let you know, okay? They want this position. They want this role.
Yeah, Jerome's not that type of guy.
He's not that type of guy. And does that mean that that's given people a reason to shy away from him? No. I mean, once again, he's a highly respected individual. He's been with a variety of different organizations. I think it just comes down to, once again, does Brian Dable want to stick with internal options and give them play calling opportunities, or does he now want to go outside of his acquaintances? I mean, for example, here's another player or individual that we were talking about, Mike Kafka, okay? he didn't have ties to Mike Kafka. He brought in Mike Kafka from Kansas City, and Kafka had not called plays, John, previously, and he gave him that opportunity. So, once again, you could point to many different individuals on staff, and I think they fit into different boxes across the NFL, where some have had experience, others haven't. So I don't really think there's anything that at least Brian Daboll is saying to himself, I can't go down this road when he's been exposed to all of those pathways.
In Atlanta, Lance, he was the passing game coordinator on defense, but he always had a defensive coordinator ahead of him calling the plays. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a good question. Let's go to Doug in Glen Falls, who'll wrap us up today. Hey, Dougie.
Hi. I guess what my main question, John, is, and the guys you were just talking about that with people internally, isn't one of the key questions that Joe Shane and the ball are going to be asking all these DC candidates is what kind of scheme, and if they would try and take the players that are on the roster already and try and maybe adjust their scheme to be able to utilize those players or do something else.
No, Doug, absolutely. I think a big part of all those interviews would be, all right, look, here are the guys that we consider the cornerstones of our defense. And the conversation starts with Dexter Lawrence, then you go to Bobby Okereke, then you go to Kayvon Thibodeau, then you go to Deonte Banks, and you say, all right, these are the guys that are going to be here, all right? These are the guys that we're building around. Coach, how do you want to use these players, and how do you want to utilize them? And then the Giants will say, all right, well, this coach kind of wants to use them in the same way Wink did. Maybe that's a good thing because they've had success. This guy really wants to change everything that, they want. They don't want Dexter playing over the center. They want him playing more of a shade. Do we want that? They want to play more zone with Deonte Banks. Do we want to do that? Kayvon's got to be a down lineman in a 4-3. Do we want that? So, yeah, I think finding a coach that will utilize the personnel lens in the best possible way is a huge part of this interview process. No doubt about it.
Well, that's why I said when Brian Daboll has interviews, whether you hire the guy or not, you're getting input from external individuals, which to me is a good thing. But I will say this, there's no way that they're going to hire anybody that does not like, Doug, the personnel grouping, okay? If you have an interview and the defensive coordinator candidate starts telling you, well, I don't know if we could use him, then he's probably not the right guy to fit. So you want to hear good things. You want to hear that they're enamored with the personnel and they're going to do something positive with them.
Now, of the staples. Now, if there are some, fringe guys that the guy maybe doesn't like, that's fine. But
or guys that are free agents, and maybe the Giants front office is not going to bring them back anyway.
Yeah, they are not going to hire somebody that says, I really don't want to have Bobby Okereke, Kayvon Thibodeau on my team. That is just not going to work for my defense. And that guy's not getting the job.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense?
You answered my question. Yeah, have a good day.
All right, Doug. You too, Doug.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call.
The other individual, by the way, if we're talking about internal candidates, Andre Patterson has been a defensive coordinator before with the Vikings.
But he was a co-defensive coordinator?
He was a co-defensive coordinator with Mike Zimmer's son. So they could also entertain him as an option. He's done a really nice job developing some of these young defensive linemen.
They can go
and has a great track record with Minnesota.
They could go run game coordinator and pass game coordinator too. And then maybe if Patterson would, since he has experience, they would call the plays. They could work this a number of different ways. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, is it the title or is it who has the role? That's the bigger debate. Some individuals, and you get into pay and this and that. Do they want the title or do they want the job on game day calling the plays? That's to each their own, but those are the two. Jerome Henderson, Andre Patterson, I think are the most appealing individuals in-house that have a wealth of experience. And in Patterson's case, he at least has been a defensive coordinator and has been able to orchestrate traffic on game day in terms of calling the plays. So, that may also give Brian Daboll some food for thought.
Lance, good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Lance Meadow, I'm John Schmelk. That's Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Thank you so much for being with us. Don't forget, the Giants' official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV, brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. For Lance Meadow, I'm John Schmelk. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm off to Frisco, then Mobile. I will not be hosting the show until the week after the Senior Bowl, so that's about good, 10, 12 days away. I look forward to being back, but don't worry, I'm bringing a little Comrex box, so I'll be joining, hopefully with clear audio throughout the week, next week, giving you all the latest of what's happening from Mobile at the Senior Bowl. We'll see you then, everybody. Adios.
Introducing the Lisa Chill Collection, your answer to hot nights. These mattresses beat the heat with ultra-cool covers, whisking away heat for the perfect sleep temperature. Save up to $460 on Chill mattresses and get 2 free pillows when you shop now. iHeart listeners can save an extra $50 off by visiting lisa.com/iHeart. That's LEESA.com/iHeart. Exclusions apply. See lisa.com for more details.
Cocoa Beach, Orlando's closest beach, welcomes you with cool vibes and tasty waves. The surfing capital of the East Coast, Cocoa Beach is your authentic Florida beach town with a laid-back charm. Drop into an ocean of fun with the tastiest waves on the East Coast and chill in the coolest spots under the sun. Cocoa Beach, it's legendary. Plan your trip now at legendarycocobeach.com. Cocoa Beach on Florida's Space Coast.